I never believed divine forgiveness could reach someone like me, a Nazi officer who participated in unspeakable atrocities. But have you ever wondered if there are some acts so terrible that even God cannot forgive them? My name is Wilhelm. I was a Wehrmacht officer who experienced clinical death and encountered Jesus during my near-death experience. What Jesus revealed to me about divine mercy will prove that no sin is too great, no darkness too deep, no person too far gone for transformational love, even a Nazi soldier. What I experienced was so profound, so impossible, it transformed a Nazi soldier into an instrument of God's love. Let me take you back to how a patriotic German soldier became something so dark that even I believed I was beyond redemption. I was a soldier, then an officer in the Wehrmacht during World War II. I convinced myself I was serving my country, protecting the fatherland, but the truth is, I participated in unspeakable atrocities. I was there when villages were burned. I watched as innocent people were herded like cattle. I followed orders that I knew in my heart were evil, and worse than that, I began to believe they were justified. What I'm about to tell you isn't comfortable. It isn't easy, but it's true, and it changed my life forever. I was a man who had blood on my hands, hatred in my heart, and no hope of redemption. If what happened to me can happen to anyone, then you need to hear this story. What happened next was beyond anything I could have imagined. But first, you need to understand the monster I became. The hardening of my soul didn't happen overnight. It began with small compromises, little justifications. When I first enlisted, I told myself I was defending Germany from its enemies. When the orders became more brutal, I told myself I was just following commands. When I participated in raids on Jewish communities, I convinced myself they were threats to our national security. Each act of cruelty made the next one easier. Each time I silenced my conscience, it became quieter. I remember the exact moment I knew I had crossed a line I could never uncross. It was December 1943, and I was standing in the snow watching smoke rise from what had once been someone's home. A child's toy soldier lay in the ash at my feet, the same kind I had played with as a boy, but instead of feeling horror, I felt nothing. That emptiness terrified me more than any enemy fire ever could. By 1944, I was no longer the young man who had joined the army with patriotic dreams. I was something else entirely. I had witnessed horrors and participated in them. I had looked into the eyes of children and felt nothing but contempt. My heart had become a fortress of ice, and I believed that was strength. I thought I was evolved beyond the weakness of compassion. I remember one specific moment that haunts me still. Looking into the eyes of a young girl, no more than 8 years old, clutching her mother's hand as soldiers herded them toward the trucks. Her eyes were wide with confusion, not yet understanding the horror ahead. In that moment, I felt nothing. That emptiness where compassion should have been, that was when I knew I had become something monstrous. But here's what will shock you about divine justice. What I discovered next completely shattered my understanding of mercy. But first, let me tell you about the moment that changed everything, the moment I was forced to confront the ultimate consequence of who I had become. Death was only the beginning of my real education. I was wounded in the final months of the war, caught in an artillery blast near Berlin. Shrapnel tore through my chest and abdomen. As I lay bleeding in that shell crater, I felt my life slipping away. My breathing became labored, shallow. The world grew dim around me. I thought about my mother, about the boy I used to be before the war consumed everything good in me, and then everything went black. What I experienced next defies every scientific explanation I was taught to believe. One moment I was dying in that crater, the next I was floating above my own body. I could see myself lying there, blood soaking into the earth, my uniform torn and dirty. Medical personnel were working frantically, but I could tell from their expressions that it was too late. I was dead. Clinically, medically dead. But somehow I was still conscious, still thinking, still experiencing everything with a clarity I had never known in life. I watched as they covered my body with a sheet. I saw my fellow soldiers shake their heads and move on to help the wounded who might still be saved. But I wasn't gone. I was more alive than I had ever been, just existing in a completely different state. Every medical textbook I had ever read said this was impossible. Dead meant dead. But as I watched those medics shake their heads and move on, I wanted to scream, "I'm still here. I'm still thinking. How can I be more aware, more alive than I'd ever been, while my body lies motionless in the mud?" The gamma wave surges that scientists have recently documented in dying patients give us a glimpse of what I lived through. In those moments after my heart stopped, my awareness expanded beyond anything I could have imagined. I began to move away from my body, drawn by a pull I couldn't resist and didn't want to resist. What happened next defies everything modern science tells us is possible, and it's about to change how you see divine justice forever. As I moved through this impossible state of consciousness, a terrifying realization began to dawn on me. I was about to face judgment for every single thing I had done. Little did I know, everything I thought I knew about existence was about to be shattered. The moment of reckoning I had dreaded was about to unfold in ways I never could have imagined. What I saw next was beyond description, but I have to try to share it with you because it changes everything. I found myself in what I can only call a review of my entire life. Every moment, every decision, every action was displayed before me with perfect clarity. But this wasn't just watching memories like a film. I was experiencing every moment from multiple perspectives simultaneously. Let me give you one specific example that shows you how complete this experience was. I saw myself in that village again, but this time I wasn't just Wilhelm the soldier giving orders. I was suddenly Maria, the baker's wife, watching her ovens go cold as flames consumed her life's work. I was Hans, the 12-year-old boy who couldn't understand why the nice soldiers from yesterday were now destroying everything he loved. The pain wasn't just emotional, it was as if every nerve in my being was experiencing their terror simultaneously. I need you to understand, this wasn't like watching a movie of your life. When I experienced being Maria, I didn't just see her fear, I felt her hands shaking as she tried to hide her wedding ring. I tasted the copper of terror in her mouth. I felt her heart breaking as she realized her children would grow up without their mother. For the first time, I understood that every order I had followed had shattered an entire world. I experienced the terror of every person who suffered because of my actions. I felt the confusion and fear of the children who didn't understand why soldiers were destroying their homes. I lived through the desperation of parents trying to protect their families. I experienced the heartbreak of elderly people watching their lifelong communities burn. The pain was indescribable, not physical pain, but something far deeper. I felt every act of cruelty I had committed, as if I were both the perpetrator and the victim. The hatred I had carried for so long turned inward, and I understood with devastating clarity what I had become. I was drowning in the weight of my own choices, suffocating under the reality of the suffering I had caused. But wait, this wasn't punishment, this was education, and what Jesus showed me next about forgiveness will absolutely blow your mind. This wasn't condemnation from some external judge, this was truth, pure and undiluted. God wasn't punishing me, He was educating me. Every moment of that life review was showing me the interconnectedness of all consciousness, the reality that when we harm others, we harm ourselves and the entire fabric of existence. I was learning what divine justice really means, and it was far more complete and perfect than any human court could ever be. What I experienced in that moment of judgment would teach me the most profound lesson about divine justice. I expected to be cast into some pit of eternal torment. I deserved it. I had earned it. I was ready for it. Then, in that moment of absolute despair when I had accepted my fate, the impossible began to unfold. In that moment of complete hopelessness, when I had accepted my eternal condemnation, something impossible began to happen. A light appeared. Not the harsh, artificial light of searchlights I remembered from the war, but something entirely different. This was a soft white light that seemed to emanate love itself. As it approached, I felt waves of warmth that began to penetrate the ice around my heart. The light wasn't blinding, though it was brighter than anything I had ever seen. Instead, it was welcoming, inviting me to approach, and within that light, I saw him. Jesus. I know how that sounds. I know some of you might think this is religious fantasy or wish fulfillment, but I'm telling you what happened to me, and you can decide for yourself what it means. He didn't look like the paintings I had seen in churches. His appearance was both human and transcendent, familiar yet impossible to fully comprehend. His eyes held depths of compassion that made me want to weep, and depths of wisdom that made me understand how little I truly knew about anything. When he looked at me, I expected judgment. I expected the cosmic accounting for every evil thing I had done. Instead, I felt something that nearly destroyed me with its power: unconditional love. He spoke to me, not with words, but with direct communication that bypassed language entirely. "Wilhelm," he said, and hearing my name spoken with such tenderness after what I had become was almost unbearable. "You have seen the truth of what you were, and now you must see the truth of what you can become." I tried to speak, to apologize, to explain, to make excuses. But he raised his hand gently, and I understood that he already knew everything. Every thought I had ever had, every choice I had made, every moment of my life was known to him, and still, inexplicably, impossibly, he loved me. But here's what shook me to my core. When he looked at me, he didn't see Wilhelm the Nazi officer. He didn't see the monster I had become. He saw that frightened boy who had enlisted to protect his mother. He saw every moment of secret shame, every time my conscience had screamed against what I was doing. He saw the real me buried underneath years of hatred and fear. "The evil you participated in was real," he continued. "I expected him to turn away, to cast me into darkness." Instead, his next words shattered every assumption I had about divine justice. "But Wilhelm, you were also real. The frightened young man who enlisted to protect his mother. The boy who once helped an injured bird back to flight. The soul who wept in secret when he first witnessed cruelty. All of that was real too. The suffering you caused was real. The darkness you embraced was real. But so is my love for you. So is the possibility of redemption. So is the power of transformation." I felt something breaking inside me, some wall that had been built stone by stone through years of cruelty and hatred. The divine light was washing over that hatred like water over a fire, not extinguishing it through force, but transforming it through love into something entirely different. "Even I can be forgiven?" I asked, though I already knew the answer from the love radiating from him. "Especially you," he replied. "My forgiveness is not limited by the depth of your sin. It is limited only by the depth of your willingness to receive it and be transformed by it." He showed me something then that shattered every assumption I had about justice and mercy. I saw how my story, my transformation, could become part of his larger plan of redemption. He showed me other souls who had committed terrible acts and found forgiveness. I saw the ripple effects of genuine repentance and transformation spreading outward like light pushing back darkness. What he showed me next would completely transform my understanding of forgiveness. But then came the moment that would determine not just my eternal fate, but my entire purpose on earth. But Jesus wasn't finished with me yet. What he offered next would test everything I thought I understood about redemption. I could stay in that place of perfect love and peace, leaving behind forever the world where I had caused so much pain. Or I could return to life, to my broken body, to bear witness to the transformational power of divine forgiveness. If you return, he said, your life will not be easy. You will carry the weight of what you've done, but you will also carry the light of what I've shown you. You will spend your remaining years seeking to repair what can be repaired and to prevent others from walking the path of darkness you chose. I looked back at my body lying in that crater, and I made the hardest decision of my existence. I chose to return. The return to my broken body was more jarring than leaving it had been. One moment I was surrounded by infinite love. The next I was gasping for air in a shell crater, forever changed. When I returned to my body, everything had changed. The medical personnel who had given up on me were shocked when I suddenly gasped for air. My wounds, while still severe, began healing faster than anyone expected. But the real changes were deeper than physical. The hatred that had consumed me for years was simply gone. In its place was a profound love for every human being I encountered. The ice around my heart had melted completely, replaced by a warmth that seemed to radiate outward. I couldn't look at another person without seeing their inherent worth, their connection to the divine, their potential for both good and evil. The first test came 3 days later. A dying German soldier, delirious with pain, grabbed my uniform and whispered, "Kill the Jews before they kill us." When he grabbed my uniform, his eyes were wild with the same hatred that had once consumed me. But instead of seeing an enemy to destroy, I saw my younger brother Klaus, the same desperate fear, the same pain driving him to seek someone to blame. I held his trembling hand and said, "Tell me about your mother." "What was her name?" His grip loosened. "Greta," he whispered. "She made the best apple strudel in Bavaria." I smiled. "My mother's was terrible. She always burned the edges, but I'd give anything to taste it one more time." He actually laughed just for a moment before the morphine took him to a peaceful end. I spent the remaining months of the war trying to save lives instead of taking them. When other soldiers questioned my sudden change, I shared my experience. Some thought I had been damaged by my injuries, but others listened. A few even experienced their own transformations. I learned that authentic spiritual change is contagious in the best possible way. After the war, I dedicated my life to seeking forgiveness from those I had wronged and working to repair the damage I had caused. I became a Christian, not because of religious doctrine I had been taught, but because of what I had experienced directly. I spent decades working with Holocaust survivors, contributing to rebuilding efforts, and sharing my testimony with anyone who would listen. Now here's the part that's going to change everything for you personally. Now you might be wondering why I'm sharing this story with you. What does my transformation have to do with your life? Everything. That transformation I experienced, from a man consumed by hatred to someone filled with divine love, leads me to the most important message I need to share with you. If I can be forgiven, anyone can be forgiven. I was part of one of history's greatest evils. I participated in atrocities that should have damned me beyond any hope of redemption. I had blood on my hands, hatred in my heart, and ice where my compassion should have been. If divine mercy is powerful enough to transform someone like me, then it's powerful enough for anyone. Here's the message that changed everything, not just for me, but for anyone willing to receive it. Let me tell you what Jesus showed me about forgiveness that no seminary could teach. He took me back to that moment with the 8-year-old girl, but this time, instead of feeling nothing, I experienced what he had felt watching me in that moment. Not anger, not condemnation, but heartbreak. Not for her suffering alone, but for what I was doing to my own soul. His love wasn't about overlooking what I'd done. It was about seeing who I could still become, despite what I'd done. But here's what might shock you. This transformation isn't reserved for dramatic near-death experiences. What if I told you that the same divine love that reached me in that tunnel of light is trying to reach you right now, in this very moment as you watch this video? The message Jesus gave me wasn't just about my personal redemption. It was about the universal availability of divine mercy for anyone willing to receive it authentically. You don't have to be perfect to be loved by God. You don't have to clean yourself up before approaching the divine. You just have to be willing to see the truth about yourself and be transformed by love that's more powerful than any darkness you've embraced. Listen to me carefully. This next truth could transform your life in the next 60 seconds. Maybe you're watching this and you've done things you believe are unforgivable. Maybe you carry guilt and shame that feels too heavy to bear. Maybe you've convinced yourself that you're beyond hope, beyond redemption, beyond love. I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. I've been where you are. I've felt the weight of terrible choices and the certainty that I was beyond saving. But I learned that divine love is not limited by human understanding of justice. It's not restrained by our concepts of fairness. It's powerful enough to transform the most hardened heart, deep enough to heal the most devastating wounds, and persistent enough to pursue us no matter how far we've wandered into darkness. The question isn't whether forgiveness is available to you. The question is whether you're willing to receive it and be transformed by it. Are you ready to see yourself as you really are, accept responsibility for what you've done, and allow divine love to make you into someone new? This isn't about easy grace or cheap forgiveness. This is about authentic transformation that changes everything about who you are and how you live. It's about becoming a person who contributes to healing rather than harm, who spreads light rather than darkness, who builds up rather than tears down. Picture this. Tomorrow morning you wake up, and instead of carrying the weight of your worst moments, you feel genuinely excited about who you're becoming. Instead of avoiding mirrors because of shame, you look yourself in the eye with compassion. Instead of believing you're beyond hope, you know with absolute certainty that your story is just beginning to get good. Your story doesn't have to end with your worst moments. Your past doesn't have to define your future. The person you've been doesn't have to be the person you remain. If a Nazi soldier can encounter divine mercy and be transformed into an instrument of peace, then transformation is possible for anyone. But you have to choose it. You have to want it. You have to be willing to leave behind the old self and embrace the new person divine love wants to create in you. So I have one final question that could change your life forever. When I first told you my name was Wilhelm, a former Nazi officer, many of you probably wondered if someone like me could truly find forgiveness. I promised you'd witness divine mercy that would shatter every limit you've placed on God's love. You've now walked with me from that shell crater through my encounter with Jesus, and you've seen the impossible become reality. In that tunnel of light, Jesus didn't just forgive me. He showed me that my story of transformation would become hope for others drowning in their own darkness. Every person who finds freedom through my testimony fulfills the purpose He gave me when I chose to return to life. You're not just watching a video, You're participating in the continuation of divine redemption. Wilhelm's message isn't meant to stay with you alone. Right now, someone in your life carries the same burden I once did, convinced they're beyond forgiveness, drowning in shame just like I was in that shell crater. You now hold the key to their freedom. Share Wilhelm's testimony with them. Tag them in the comments, send them this video. Let them know that if a Nazi soldier can find divine mercy, so can they. Your simple act of sharing could be the moment their impossible becomes possible. The light I encountered in my near-death experience is available to you right now, right where you are. You don't have to die to experience divine love. You don't have to wait for some future moment to begin your transformation. The same Jesus who met me in that tunnel of light is reaching out to you today, offering you the same impossible, wonderful, life-changing love that rescued me from my own darkness. Right now, as you're watching this, speak directly to Jesus, not with perfect words, but with honest need. Jesus, Wilhelm's story gives me hope. I'm ready to experience the same forgiveness that transformed him. Show me your love that reaches even into my deepest shame. That's the prayer that opens the door to the same divine encounter I experienced. Your transformation begins the moment you're willing to receive it.